Okay, everybody, in this video, I'm going to try to explain or how one can read and interpret the Pierre Bourdieu graph. Uh, this is how the graph looks like in its entirety, you know. Uh, it can be complex, but I'm going to try to explain the labels and the basic scheme that he uses here. Um, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Uh, Before I do this, explanation of the labels, this graph fits together with his theory of habitus and Purdue's theory of cultural capital. So if I briefly explain his idea around habitus, uh, habitus is like the habits of individuals or classes that relates to the habitat in which people live in or reside in, uh, which also relates to the different forms of cultural capital that they may possess, right? So that's his theory that he develops as related to the graph. So some of the labels here should be very simple. At the very top of the graph, he has this capital volume plus, which obviously means uh, more abundant of cultural capital, higher forms of capital, where he puts things like golf, tennis, ski boat as an example. He also implies here upper classes indirectly, right? The same thing happens at the very bottom of the graph, but here he puts capital minus, volume minus, which implies the lower classes, right? Economic classes, professions, things like this. So this a basic north and south kind of uh, depiction in the graph. Okay, now it's going to get a little bit more tricky, maybe also more interesting. He also tries to map out this left-right political distinction. Okay, so I'm going to start on the left side of the graph. He thinks that on this side, this is also where people are located on the left side of the political spectrum. So like if they're progressives or liberals. If you look at this label here, he basically argues that for liberals and progressive, they have lots of cultural capital, but very little economic capital. So as an example, I think he puts artists there. So many artists, for a lifetime, they are often unemployed, uh, but they have great artistic things that they produce in a lifetime, you know. But usually the money aspect usually happens after they're dead, or they have very little money. Probably the same thing with teachers, which he also puts teachers on the graph on the left side. So teachers, have years of schooling, training, credentials, knowledge about culture, but often don't get paid as well as other professions, right? So, so this fits on the left side of the graph. Let's look on the right side of the graph. So this is a reverse. So this would be people located more on the right side of the political spectrum who tend to vote for conservative parties, right? So in the United States, that would be the Republican Party. Here he labels uh, minus cultural capital, right? But an abundance of economic capital, right? So a good way to explain this would be, business owners are more geared towards money-making aspects and not so much about cultural knowledge, right? So maybe if you're a billionaire, you may be able to purchase all the Picasso paintings of the world, but could you really draw like Picasso? You know? So there's definitely a difference then between economic capital, which a business owner has, but lacking cultural capital, right? That maybe something like artists have, or author or writer. Okay, so I just wanted to briefly explain the Pierre Bourdieu graph. I'm also going to encourage some discussion on this in the coffee lounge. I want to also make a disclaimer that this was geared towards France, right? Uh, However, we might think about it in the context of the United States too. So if we were to redraw this in US settings, how would it look like? So I hope this video is helpful, and see you later.